All right, Coach, what's going on? Welcome. Glad to have you, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your Sunday to talk some football with me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Any dogs in the fight today for either of the games?
I love to see Commanders. Being a Seattle guy and seeing all those Seattle guys on staff over there is pretty sweet.
Okay.
Commanders, Bills, man. I don't know how you don't want Bills Mafia in the Super Bowl.
I know I think I'm as long as it's not the Chiefs, I'm good with any of the other three teams. I think I would have been, you know, as long as it's not the Chiefs or the Packers going in, because I'm a Bears fan, I would have been okay with anyone else in the Super Bowl this year. So.
Hey, at least you have Ben Johnson not hang your hat on.
I know we're very cautious. We're a cautiously optimistic fan base, so we'll see how it goes. But well, I talked a little bit before. I gave the intro, kind of talked about where you've been, and obviously had some successful seasons. Talk to me about the how the offensive line has played a role in some of those more successful seasons that you've had.
I mean, to me, it's just a culture setter. Like the culture of your offensive line is the culture of your football program. I
Yeah,
think I've learned that like through being in the Arena League, through being in high school. Like your offensive line sets the tone, not just for your offense, for your team. Like you could talk about like ball control and stuff like that, but when it comes to like diligence with detail work and it comes to mentality of physicality, like the offensive line sets the table for everything.
yeah,
So you can have a great back, but you can't open up lanes or you can't have that mentality of strain like on the offensive line. I don't think it spreads everywhere else because I think it's just contagious.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you often find teams with you know good offensive lines and not good backs that are successful, but very rarely do you find a team that's got an unworldly running back but not a good offensive line. Those don't they just don't go hand in hand. The line usually makes that guy look better in my opinion anyways. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen otherwise. Yeah, I'm up for open for debate, but I always feel like it doesn't go that way.
Very rare. And in a school like our size, like we're around, a typical like 30 boys in the program as a whole.
Okay.
Like we're lucky to be in that mid 40s range, but I mean, we have years, like even the really good years, like our running backs aren't our best athletes. Like we really focus on putting our best athletes up front. Um,
Okay.
and it used to be, back in the day it was like the Civil War, right? You load the musket, you just fire off and you kind of see what happens there.
Yeah.
Like you put your best athlete running back, even though he's like 220, 5'8", 230. But really, I mean, I think as a program, if you really focus that direction towards the front, like it just changes everything. Like you're gonna have a
Yeah.
sub, not a stellar running back. At the end of the day, if you're able to grind out 5 to 6, it turns into 9.
Right.
Like that just sets the culture tone.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I've seen there's a couple schools like I remember watching growing up where um I'd watch like state championship games and the fullback. They were like a wing T team or like a flex bone team or something, and the fullback would be a senior, but they would all I remember them talking about on the broadcast was how he was like a guard the year before, right? Like he fit in, but they were just trying to get their best 11 on the field, and that's where he fit was at guard, and then now he could just he's like you just said 5'8", 5'9", 220, and they just moved him back to fullback as a senior, and then he'd rush for 1,500 yards
Yeah,
because he was running behind road graders again up front. So. That's an interesting philosophy though. But you're right. At a smaller school, like where are you going to put your eggs? You going to put them in the basket of we're going to be really good skill wise, or are you going to put them in the basket of hey, we don't have we've got average skill players. We need these guys to be elite linemen. Let's go make them elite linemen and focus on that. So
totally. Yeah, and if you think about like how you maintain consistent success at a level like that, where it's kind of like the roll of the dice with whatever kids you get, like
yeah,
pretty rarely you're going to have like a really good quarterback, but it's pretty common that you can find 5 guys that want to strain, that want to put the
right,
time in the weight room. Like that,
yeah.
to me, I think that's just more of a how do you create consistent success. I think that's the safest way to create consistent success.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't disagree at all. Um, talk to me a little bit. Obviously, in your bio, you talked about you created that program. You built that program at Northwest Christian from the ground up. How did that process start? How did you get involved with that? And let's talk a little bit because I'm a big believer in, you talked strain. I like to hear about the struggles. So let's talk a little bit about kind of some of the struggles you've had along the way or that you had previously.
Man, if I could tell you. So we started this program. It's a private school, right?
Yeah.
So they finally come up with the idea. So when I graduated, I had to play at public school. So I went to the school, but we didn't have football. So I had to play at public schools. So the year after, 2 years after I graduated, like, we're gonna start the program, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I walk into the AD's office, and they hired a head coach who's coaching over in Europe now. They hired the guy, and like he walks in, and I'm like, hey, like, do you want help with football program? Like, I graduated, I played football in high school, and he's like, yep. And I'm like, well, who's on the staff? And he goes, you're the first. So, so we really like it. Really started from the ground up. Like we had four guys with experience. Like
Yeah.
it was a haul. They were all sophomores, so you were teaching kids everything, which I think was great because we had a lot of green coaches, but everybody learned everything from the ground up. So everything was meticulous with every little detail. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
just what's the product; it was what's the process to get to the product.
Yeah.
Um, so it was. I mean, I remember the first year we lost to a school. They were a single wing team. The kids had no idea what it was because they only played right. So
Right.
they're like, "What is this prehistoric thing?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Everybody's there." And so it was. I mean, we lost like 82-14. Like it was just bad.
Yeah.
But year three, we were in the semis. We had a lot of like we kind of progressed as we went through. And I think it really came from the ground up. Like we've had good years, we've had bad years. Like in a small school, like we had a year we had like 18 kids. Like at one point, like we had a shift in head coach, we had a shift in like just kind of how we did things. And in a school, like in a small school, especially a private school,
Yep.
like it is so easy to take the easy way out and to kind of think like, oh well, they had to do a lot of strain, they had to work their tail off. Like I don't know if I really want to be a part of that. Like when they're young, especially because if you push the young kids too much, like their first reaction is not do it because when you've been given everything, it's hard to learn how to take something and the
Right.
kind of like what that process looks like. So it really took a long time to kind of reset that because I took over as the head coach 5 years ago, like during COVID, which by the way I wouldn't recommend to anybody. That was an ill-advised move on my part. Um, but it really took a while to reestablish that culture of like strain's okay, like the
Yeah.
weight room is great, like how do we have fun doing this, and how are you guys enjoying the culture that we're setting? But it was a process, man. Like teaching everything from the ground up. Like we've just now started getting flag football involved for the youth. And like we've had
Okay.
a school program for a little while, and like you really just have to develop in the process, and like especially with those young kids, like when they're old and they come out, and we get that every once in a while. It's like how do we teach them how to do five really good things?
Right.
When yeah, but I tell you what, man, starting a program with four guys with experience, that is something else. It
Yeah.
felt like those guys that go over and coach in Europe that like show up and it's like the bad news bears, and it's like this guy doesn't know how to put on his shoulders pads.
Right.
Like Mike Witowski from The Longest Yard, where he's like, he broke my nose. Like you
Eh,
get kind of like big fellas. Um, but it was good and it's rewarding, man.
yeah.
It was worth every penny.
What is and I don't know, forgive me for not knowing much
Yeah.
about the community. Is it a big community or is it a
No.
small it's a real okay, so that's kind of
Yeah.
why yeah. So
So we're
is there public school in the area too or just the
Yes. So
okay.
so Spokane's a pretty big city. So we have a
Okay,
pretty
yeah,
big
yeah.
like public school district. And so we're just a private school just north of Spokane.
Okay.
Um so our community has so we have about 214 kids in the school as a whole. So we
Okay.
get about half the boys to play football, which has been an awesome change in the last couple of years, the kind of
Yeah.
the stage of the culture. But it's not a huge community, and it's not a huge football entrenched community. So every once in a while, we have a kid that comes through that dad played it wherever, and brothers played wherever. But like for the most part, like most of these kids' parents don't play football,
Yeah.
so it's a blessing and a curse. Like it's a blessing that I don't want to say there's like a long leash for things, but there's a lot of trust with how the process goes because they just don't know.
Sure.
So you kind of have an ability to build a blank slate and to get parent support. But it's a negative from the fact that a lot of times when these kids come in, they just don't get what it takes at
Right.
times.
Right. Well, but that comes with them not really knowing like you said they haven't played but with you guys now doing flag and with you guys starting more of the youth
Mhm.
program making it more of a an all-encompassing program because I'm assuming the school is just 9 through 12.
No, so we have an elementary school. We actually have two elementary schools now.
Okay.
So everything's now coming up. So now we have the parents that want to jump in and do it, which is the big thing. Like, how do you
Yeah.
find dads that are willing to work with that group all the way up and through?
Yeah.
And so now we kind of have that set. So now we're starting to see the football kids come through, which has been
Right.
awesome last
Yeah,
couple.
that's yeah, I mean that's that takes a patient person too, right? Like
Oh,
to know, hey, little Johnny, he might be a shrimp, but he's a super good athlete. And if you know, and I'm sure, and you know as well as I know, like don't pigeonhole these kids into a position. Like don't say, oh, he's that's going to be our quarterback or that's going to be our whatever. Like no, like he's a super good athlete. Let's see what happens. He's definitely going to play, but you know, like you were talking about at the beginning, maybe he's going to be a 5'9", 180 pound kid who, hey, he's going to be our pulling guard, or you know, he might be the best athlete in the class, but hey, he's bigger than everyone else. Let's plug him at this spot, but he knows football, right? He's been playing since he was 8 instead of these kids coming in for the first time when they're 14, 15 and trying to put put their football feet on, so to speak.
yeah. And how do kids like change through the years? Like everybody changes so much that you just
Exactly.
don't know. You really want to develop a kid at a spot, but at the end of the day, like they might be a senior and be, they could be a running back for 2 years and then be like, well, you're put on a little weight, son. You got to some love handles. Like I think it's
Yeah.
time you snap a ball,
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
stuff like that.
I've seen that firsthand. I mean, I know multiple cases of kids like were fullbacks. I mean, I know one in particular a few years ago was a fullback linebacker all the way up until he got to his senior year, and he was never a starter. And we said, I remember the head coach and I talked to him and said, "Hey man, you can start at guard, or you can continue to be like a backup linebacker who maybe gets 10 snaps all season on offense." And it was a easy decision for that kid to make, and he became a really good football player for us. So,
Yeah.
but I've also seen it on the other side of things where like, little Timmy's a quarterback at 10. Well, little Timmy doesn't progress past 5'7" when he gets to high school and can't throw the ball 30 yards downfield now that it's a full size ball. But why are we still worrying about little Timmy playing quarterback? So it
Oh,
definitely, the
yeah.
stubbornness, yeah, the stubbornness definitely goes both ways.
We have a kid in our program that played middle school. He was the quarterback. And so I walked up to his mom and I'm like, hey, I have some news for you. He's not going to play quarterback. Like he's putting his hand on the ground. Like
Yeah,
he's just this stocky 5'7" kid, like 200 pounds already in middle school. I'm like, I love the kid, but he's going to be a road paver now. Like he could
right.
have jumped quarterback right now, but he's high school's coming for him pretty soon here. But I've seen his dad, so he's going to be a brick house.
How did that conversation go?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. You know what?
I was waiting for the other shoe
No.
to drop. Yeah.
That's kind of the cool thing about being at Northwest. Like we don't have parent issues. Honestly, like
Yeah.
it's very, very, very rare. Like if you just, in my experience, if you just cast the vision, you just communicate, the people all understand. And like, how do you build the culture? And for us, like selfless Christ like attitude, but like, how do you build this selfless idea? And how does that seep into the community? Like, how do you understand? Like, hey, like this is what we need.
Yeah.
Like it's the we above me thing, right? Like how do you do what you're supposed to do for everybody else? Because
Right.
like, if you're making this about you, then yeah, and like, well, little Timmy might get a college scholarship. Well, who knows what little Timmy's going to go play? We have a kid that's playing tackle at Washington State right now that was a tight end for us. Like they're going to
Right.
make what they want you to be if you're a good ball player.
Right.
Like, and they're going to see that. Like they're smart enough to figure that out. They're not
Yeah.
dumb.
That's why they get paid a lot of money to figure that one out on their own. So,
Oh yeah.
um, talking about that, let's quick transition. The arena football stuff. How
Oh
did you get involved with that? Because you've been involved with a couple different programs.
yeah.
How did you get involved coaching and obviously now the player personnel side of things? Where did that all begin?
So this is kind of a funny story, kind of like the Northwest story. So I got hired as an intern for a guy named Coach Shackelford, who was the coach of the Spokane Empire.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I kind of want to do this. I was in college. I was like, I'm kind of bored. Like, I'll just shoot him a DM on it, Facebook and see if he hits me back. So I'm like, hey, like, do you need any help? And he said, well, come in for an intern interview. So we interviewed a couple times. I got hired as an intern to help running backs. And then so it's like 2 days before camp, and we're sitting there going over practice plans. And he's talking about this and that. And he's like, I'm like, well, who's going to take the offensive line? And he goes, I don't know. Do you? And I've never coached offensive line before. And I'm like, sure, yeah. He's like, you've been hired, promoted. So that's kind of how I got my start as an offensive line coach in that league. And I
Yeah.
quickly realized, like a day in, I was like, oh, these guys all just got cut from the NFL. Like they're working their way back up. And
Right.
I'm just a 21-year-old kid that never, like, I played offensive line at the end of high school. Like, but I played for, like, it's a lot different then. Like,
Right.
so. So it was on like it was really cool. Like I kind of got thrown in the fire a little bit, which is awesome. Like the guys were super great. Like they were super supportive. It was I think I took for granted what knowledge that everybody has. Like
Yeah.
I've had guys that played at huge programs. I'm like, all right, we're gonna work bass today, and they're like, what's bass?
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this is a stretch. Like they're like, Les Miles just told me to down block a pole. Like, well, we're gonna have to work this a little bit. But yeah, so I kind of got in that way, and then like we folded. And so I traveled a little bit. Like I worked for the Barnstormers, where Kurt Warner played for a year, and that was super cool. Like Des Moines is a fun town.
Yeah.
I'm a big guy, so I like Midwest fast food. So that was great. And it was cool just getting to meet everybody and kind of like getting to work my way in with offensive line coaches. So like one way I kind of found my weasel my way into DMs and to talk to somebody is I'd be like, hey, like I'm looking to recruit this guy. Can you tell me about him?
Yeah.
And then I would use that conversation to kind of branch into like, hey, like how'd you run wide zone? Or hey, how did you treat like a wide nine? Like if you had like a tight, like you had aggressive set on, like how did you work that adjustment, work into that wide nine? Like were you patient with it? Were you flash aggressive and like vertical set, like stuff like that? But it was cool. And then I've kind of worked my way into personnel just from I just don't want to move. Like I
Sure.
love the high school program I'm at. A guy that I worked for is the head coach for the Tucson team. Um, so I kind of worked my way into that like director of player personnel, like GM kind of role, which is a good transition for me.
Okay.
It was cool, man. I got to work with some awesome people like Blake Sims, the quarterback at Alabama, was our quarterback in Spokane. Like I've had a lot of guys that played at LSU and Bama and Vanderbilt, and you just get to meet all these guys and kind of pick and pull from them and like what they know, and
Right.
it's cool kind of pulling like because when you're an assistant coach, especially at that level, like you're in the room, like you are a part of the room, like you are not the authority figure to an extent. Like these are all grown adults. Like you are helping them. You're there to be an asset for them to move up, and we've had a lot of guys that move up, and but like you're there to be an asset to them, and you really are just one of the guys.
Right.
So working together, like when you get to know them a little bit more and kind of like pick and pull and like what they get from programs, like some of the best drills I got when they ran at Tiffin. Like it's super cool, like to kind of see what they know and kind of collaborate that. But yeah, it was kind of just like a freak thing.
Yeah.
Like I just ran with it, and I'm super blessed, man. The Lord's really blessed me, but um, but yeah, it really just taught me diligence with the whole process. Because at the end of the day, like if these, again, not a big market for 5'8" high school offensive linemen, right?
Right.
Well, my market is coaching. That's where I'm going to be. Like nobody wants a 5'8" kid that can't really move. Um, but like especially up in the Northwest, where all we have are expensive D3s and D1.
Yeah.
But but really just that process of learning it from the ground up and kind of like working my way through it
Sure.
was really phenomenal, to be honest with you. Like I think it really kind of taught me. But then I had a chance to be like a special teams coordinator in Iowa and Nebraska, so kind of learn that route and understand the game from like a control standpoint. Like that's kind of how I view specials. Is like this is how you control the game and field position.
Right.
Was super cool. Like the game is different. Like you always like the front is the same every single time. Like it is a true zero, two tight threes, one backer in the box. But a lot of those skills, like because you isolate them and you work them so much, like how I teach offensive line outdoors is I start with a base and I start with a one-on-one pass set, like outside shade.
Sure.
And from those two skills, then we branch off how we do everything else. Um, and to me, it's proven really fruitful because if you're able to be good at those two things, like you could branch off into slide pro, you could branch off into gap scheme,
Right.
all that good stuff. But I think it really taught me the value of what are you two things that you're really passionate about with the offensive line, and how do you use those skills to then to translate into everything else that you do within your schematic stamp from your schematic umbrella.
Right. No, that's smart. That's a really the philosophy that is true though, but it's also it goes back to keeping things simple, right? Like
Yeah,
don't give them so much stuff that their head goes swimming. So I got to go back to the arena stuff.
yeah.
So you're still director of player personnel. That's a complete like do you ever have to go to Tucson for anything or that you do that completely remote?
It's mostly remote. Like
Okay.
honestly, like I'll probably go down for a game or two this year, but it's mostly remote. Like I do a lot of like when it comes to like cuts and stuff like that. Like I'll send evaluations, and I do a lot of like coach hiring stuff like that. Like I work with the head coach, and we kind of fill out the staff uh,
Wow.
and like player signings. Like I'll do a lot of that. Like
That's
just
cool.
with yeah, it's great. Like getting to
Yeah.
know guys and getting to talk to guys and help them out and
Yeah.
not super time consuming to an extent, but it's the relationships that I really loved about being in the league, like just being one of the guys that kind of transcends something I still get to do.
Sure. No, that's awesome. I mean, I've got some experience and know a few guys who've dabbled in the arena, whether it was as like a player or some
Yeah.
guys that done as coaches, and it always. I think sometimes a lot of time, not sometimes, but a lot of time it gets sort of a negative connotation, right? People think it's Bush League football when it's not,
Yeah.
when it's very much not. There's a lot of talented guys who are, like you said, maybe just got cut, maybe hanging on to their dream, don't want to give it up yet, and are highly invested in what they're doing and learning and putting that product out on the field. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's kind of it's so like our league's kind of cool. So like we're in the IFL,
right.
so it's definitely the most stable out of all the leagues now. So like, uh, oh, Matt Elam, the safety, was the first round draft pick by the Ravens. He's played in our league the last couple of years. Malik McDowell, that second round draft pick by the Seahawks, that was one of the Browns for a little bit. He
Oh
was in our
yeah.
league last year. So that's crazy because we have a kid that we signed that was a D3 kid, played at Notre Dame, guard, the RIP Notre Dame. Um, and he's going up against Malik McDowell now. So it's just it's definitely a cool thing. Like Marshawn Lynch's little brother is our running back, Devontae, absolutely
Yeah.
electric character, the exact same human, just a little bit smaller. Um, but it is like it is a little different, and I understand being Bush League with all the crazy stuff that happens, but the level of play is pretty phenomenal in the trenches because there's not a lot of them
Right.
out.
Well, but I think and I don't the Bush League comment wasn't a knock or anything, but
Oh yeah.
you get those you get like your league, the IFL, but then you get like this random
Oh.
three-team arena league that plays in, Northwest wherever and like the one what was the one that Antonio Brown wasn't involved in the
Oh,
IFL, was he?
yeah, he was in the NAL and he owned the Albany team and
Right.
like it's just everybody, a lot of owners that think they have money don't, and then they start
Yeah.
these teams and then it all somebody steals money from somebody and then it's always a problem. I mean, I've been in organizations where it's a zoo. Um but yeah, I mean it's everybody just wanting money is all it is.
Yeah.
They think they make money from it. They don't understand that like 90% of these teams operate in the red. So
Right.
like they're willing to like give up a little money to kind of run this, like it's just like you don't really get what it is to an
Right.
extent. But oh
Right.
yeah, I mean, I worked for a team. So I was with this team 2 years ago. Buddy of mine was coaching it. He called me. He had a big surgery, and he's like, "Hey, you could call the offense like the day before the game." And my DC at the high school lived with me. I'm like, "Do you want to go on a road trip 2.5 hours? And we'll go do this on a Saturday." And he's like, "Yeah." And we show up, and the turf doesn't cover the whole field. Like there's
Oh my
concrete
gosh.
benches that are up. Like the wall isn't all the way like to the wall, like to the ground. Like it's crazy. Guys can't make it because their car broke down or something. And he's
Yeah.
like, "We play the game with only two linemen." It's like I what is this? This is wild.
Wow.
But there's those out there. Like it is there is a lot of that out there. It's just like anything. Like
Yeah.
there's high schools that are that way. Like there's high
Well,
schools.
right.
It's like how do you operate? Like you just showed up 30 minutes before the game. How does this work?
Definitely. You got
Um
guys sharing helmets. Yeah. There's a lot of
oh
unfortunately there's a lot of programs that are like that. Some of them are really good too. Some of those
oh
programs
yeah, oh
like that,
yeah.
they thrive, right? They win game after game and it's bonkers.
The team that won our league last year, they had 18 kids. And they're
Yeah.
just tough. Like kids are getting off from like maybe two or three plays, and we're up like I think we're up like 13 at one point at the beginning of the third quarter, and they end up beating us 34 to I can't remember what it was 34 to like 20 something.
Yeah.
But just tough like programs make it work. They're diligent.
Do you remember the school out in Pennsylvania, I think, that they suspended like 30 of their players for a fight and they beat a team. They had 11 guys or they had 10
Yeah,
something like that and they beat they now I think that was a private school situation where it was, they had 40 absolute dudes on their team, but they beat the other team they played like 65 to nothing or something like that, and they only played 10 on defense so they could rest the one guy on offense. It was
yeah.
crazy, but if you get a bunch of absolute football players, yeah, you're gonna be pretty good no matter what size school you play. So,
Oh yeah, and it's kind of crazy. Like so, we're a private school, but we don't recruit. Like all my kids have been there for like 12 years. Like they all
right.
just it's so funny, like that whole. It's funny seeing the ecosystem other places and how it all operates. It's definitely an interesting view.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, all right, well, last question I got for you, and then I'll
Uh,
get you out of here back to your Sunday football. If you could put together a Mount Rushmore of offensive linemen from guys you coached, guys maybe you played with, or guys that you've just been a fan of, who would be on that five-man offensive line?
oh man, so I played with a guy named Jake Rogers in high school. Who was a draft pick by the Ravens. Went to Wazoo, went to Eastern Washington, and then got drafted by the Broncos. Played with the Ravens. He's definitely one. The kid that I coached, a kid named Johnny Lester, who's still at Washington State right now playing tackle. He's phenomenal. I coached a guy in the Arena League named J.R. Hensley, who played at Hawaii. Tore
Hmm.
his quad his senior year. He was like PFF's highest graded pass protecting offensive lineman. Tore his quad, ended up coming to us and playing center. All time character, has the best Peter Griffin impression you'll ever see in your life. I mean, he's been really making a career off of that alone.
Yeah.
Um, I coached a guy named Jonah Austin who played at LSU. He was in like Trey Turner and like Trey Turner's class in high school. Leonard
Oh
Fournette
yeah. Okay.
together. He was like Odell's roommate for a little bit. He was an all-time character. Missing two fingers on one of his hands.
What the
Crazy
hell?
deal. Yeah, I didn't even notice it for a couple days, which makes me feel real bad.
Yeah. Right.
Dude, why do you punch like this? Like, why are you always punching like that? And he's like, bro, like really? Like, I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, takes off his glove and he's got two fingers missing. And I'm like, dude, it's even more impressive you do what you're doing, man. I
Yeah.
take it back.
Right.
I was like, please don't punch me.
Yeah.
And I had a guy named Bill Laval who played at Utah State that was phenomenal. Played at Utah State, had a mini camp with like the Dolphins and the Raiders. He was awesome. And then I had a guy named DJ Loving who played at Grandview College, NAIA,
Yep. Yep.
in Des Moines. Played with the Barnstormers. I would pick him up from the dorms. He was like, I want to play. And he just graduated. And we're like, yeah, sure, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
he ended up being a dog. He would wear these like Nike, like tan. They weren't like Tim's, but they were kind of like in that same vein. And he would just go, he had the most awkward pass set. It was like his feet were so vertical and he was just physical. And I think he might have led the league in unsportsmanlike conduct. So I'm going to be
There
honest
we
with you.
go.
The guy
That's
was
that's
just
the guy you need.
just a road favorite. Nicest guy in the world when you talk to him.
Yeah.
Just a dog. But man, I've been so lucky to work with some awesome offensive linemen. But I'd probably make that my five.
Okay. I
Yeah, I
like
would.
it.
Yeah, I'd make. Well, I'm from Washington, so Walter Jones is the goat, obviously. So he's at the peak
Yes,
of Mount Rushmore. Then everybody
he
else kind of
is.
their way down from there.
I love the stories about Walter Jones back when like coming out of Florida State. I remember hearing that he went to the combine or he had a pro day. He ran like a 4.6 and then he left. He would hold out every off season and then would just show up like the week of the first game and make all pro and be the best. But it's just like, yeah, when you know you're that good, like when you know what it takes, uh, do what you want, man. And they didn't care. The Seahawks were just like, we know we got left tackle locked up for week one. Let's get some backups ready in the preseason and during
Well,
camp and we'll be
out
fine.
of out of all your high school kids, if you pulled them all anonymously, I think 95% of them would say, if I just show up week one, I'm fine.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm just gonna show up game one. I mean, what hog doesn't want to live that dream
Yeah, I
of
know.
just like, I'll be there when it's time to go?
Just
Like,
showing up. Yeah.
do I? And how many of them at some point during the season go, coach, the hardest part of the game is the warm-ups, man.
I
Like,
know.
what am I gonna do these? I'm not running 10 yards in a game.
They're
Going
gassed, right?
300
They're gassed
seconds.
before the first snap. Yeah.
I just
Never ends.
Zones living every hog's dream.
Yeah, right. The best. Well, coach, do me a favor, drop your Twitter handle for everybody, and let anybody know any other information if they want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mhart235 on Twitter. I'm not very good about tweeting, but I love the hog chat. It's the highlight of my week every week. And I'll be over at Seattle in a clinic talking GT counter next weekend over at the capital city, which is an awesome time.
Oh, very
But
cool.
yeah, man, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
No, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's good talking with you, and hopefully we talk before the season starts back up. But enjoy everything, and we'll see you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, coach. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care.
Appreciate it.